One dingy dingy. Two. Oh, I missed it.
No, you are it. You are live. And welcome to the Daytripper Photo Show, everybody. This is going to be an interesting week. This show is on software. We're getting into the differences between all different kinds of softwares. Now, in general, I've tended to steer toward one or two, and I haven't really branched out to a bunch of others. So a good friend of ours, Blake Zimmerman, is here with us. And for those of you who know Blake, you know that he loves trying different software. And there was a period of time where you gave yourself a photo project, didn't you, Blake, where you were doing different software all the time?
Yeah. I was testing out different software. I was trying to compare how some of them looked and how they worked and getting down to the little details. It's all part of a edit a day project that I had going. And that is not easy to do, just non-stop finding time to do an edit, especially when some days you're getting home at like 11 at night and you're like, oh crap!
I don't know how you do it. You're not the only person who's done these things. I mean, if we look back at some of our other guests, Don Komarechka, yes, everybody take your shot. He does 100 snowflakes a day project where he's literally editing 4 hours every day doing one photo. So that, I mean, how many photos did you get through? How many days did you get through for that?
I did 100 and some odd.
Jeez.
I got into over 100 and then I just couldn't keep it up. I was like, okay, I missed too many days in a row and I just stopped.
Yeah, you always say, okay, I missed a day, but I'll make it up tomorrow. And yeah, good luck with that, right?
A week later, I was just like,
I've got 6 days I have to make up. Forget it. I'll just wait for my next year's session. Anyway, Thank you for being here, Blake, and it's going to be a lot of fun talking about some of these different softwares with you. Blake's got experience in some of the different off-brand softwares, some things that maybe people haven't used a whole lot, so it'll be interesting to hear. And Michael, I mean, you do tons of composite work, and you do tons of edit work. So you have your favorite tools that you like to use. What are we talking here?
I use Capture One in Photoshop religiously. I haven't actually explored very much with any of the other programs and avoided Lightroom for most of the time I've been shooting.
It's funny because that's how I started off as well, avoiding Lightroom. I just fought it and fought it and fought it, and eventually it drew me in. But I think you find out different things about different softwares, and hopefully a show like this will open other people's minds up to what else might be out there, that all of a sudden you're like, you know what, that's a cool feature. I should try that. I should really consider this as an option. We were having our pre-chat earlier, Michael, when we were talking with Blake, and he talked about how Photoshop has that publishing feature where you can sync up things, and you were like, that sounds interesting. Is that something?
That is a really cool thing to add in.
We'll get to that a little bit more later on, I hope, at least, Blake, to talk about the different publishing things that you can do in Lightroom. But this is my point, is you can find this one feature that would be like, yeah, I should probably try that software, and then you're stuck in the wormhole. Down you go. Right? So many different types of softwares to get into. Phil, what do you shoot with? Okay, Mike, what are you thinking? I saw a face there.
Oh, no, I saw the question that was posted.
Oh, I have to go see that.
I'm just looking at that.
I haven't even opened the Q&A. That's amazing. Brandon says, what's the best software to make composite picture of star trails? Well, that's a very good question. We'll bring that up as we get into the meat and potatoes of the show, as we say. But we've got to just touch base. And Phil, you said you're not really doing a whole lot in the edit world anymore, right?
Not really. I was a lot more when I was shooting more, and I kind of slowed down shooting for a while, and now it's starting to pick back up. But I still use my kind of two basic staples. So I use Lightroom for majority of things, getting, I'm going to say, 80% of what I shoot edited start to finish. For that other 20%, bump over to Photoshop. And recently, in the last couple months, I switched over to that Creative Cloud system. Still on the fence about. But I quite like the the usability between the two. I've played around with some of the other ones back in the day. Back when I shot Nikon, I used the Nikon capture software a little bit, right, and just kind of migrated more towards the Photoshop side and then more towards the Lightroom side as I got into needing to store and work on workflow.
Right. And that's what happens. We grow, we change things, we try different things. We're going to talk all about that stuff in just a few seconds. I do want to thank our sponsors first, to let them know that without the sponsorship, without the help that we get from a lot of our dealers and so on, it makes the show and it makes our whole Daytripper environment a lot different. So LensPen has been amazing to us, and actually at the Birds of Prey session, I was handing out my lens pens to all the people on the session, and that lens pen peeps started getting passed around.
Yeah.
And we can't sell those. Like we can't get those at Henry's. I don't know why. As we were talking about earlier about Henry's purchasers, we got to get them to get lens pen in our store, or the lens pen peeps, I should say. Best little invention. I don't even know where mine is anymore.
I still want a pair.
I think
or
they
a set,
stole it.
or a thing. I don't know how to call it. But
Here it is.
yeah,
So lens pen has this little sucker right here, and I don't know. This is like the infomercial part of the show. Where?
but wait, there's more.
But wait, if you order now. So the lens pen peeps. It's just this little sucker that you stick your glasses inside of. You press down and wipe around, and it cleans your glasses. It's like 2 lens pens on either side of your glasses. It's a great one. Seriously, guys, if I get more, I will pass them out to each of you. They're amazing.
That would be awesome.
I use my lens pen as is on my glasses all the time.
Right? And that's the thing. Like,
It works
when
so
you-
well.
A lens pen does work well, but it has like carbon dust on the tip. So the carbon ends up leaving little circles on your glasses, and then you got to use a cloth to get that off.
I
This
don't even see them. I look
don't?
right through.
That's
No,
because you're blind. That's why you need glasses.
no. I only wear my glasses when I'm driving, dude.
Oh, I'm only kidding anyway. No, they have great little tools, and they're smart and well thought out, and I like it. And it's just like cotton carrier, you know. We have these little hip holsters that I absolutely love to wear. So convenient when you walk around doing day trips all the time. Phil, where's the headphones?
They're beside me.
Put you on the spot here. I gave Phil
I
the
have some-
Sennheiser headphones that we
They
had.
fold up nicely.
They do, don't they? Look at them. They look so much better on your webcam than on mine. Are they even plugged in?
No.
No.
I'll plug them in. I'll get double the volume.
That's how it works. So yeah, Sennheiser, thank you guys so much, and of course Gentech and all the Sigma lenses that we used on the last day trip. It's just great having a selection of gear to play around with on our day trip. So thank you all so much for supporting Daytripper and for supporting our show. Gave away a bunch of prizes on last week's show. We had our big photo reveal for the quarter end where we gave away a Daytripper coupon and a whole bunch of lens pen and cotton carrier gifts. It was a lot of fun. Good show. And Phil, thank you very. Oh, you've got it right there. Cool.
Yes, I was saving it just for today, just to show it off as I wait for delivery to take place.
Yes, this is our big winner from last week's show. So Christine, congratulations once again, and Phil, thank you for getting those to her.
No problem. Well, I haven't gone to her yet, so we'll see what happens.
Shortly, soon, hopefully soon.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Jason-
of course he's getting them to her. Of course.
Yeah.
On the other side, guys, I got a bunch of lens pens and a cool cotton carrier. I can't wait to show you next time we shoot.
You're fired. Anyway, good stuff. Thank you all so much. And let's get to the discussion here, guys. I think it's funny, actually, before we do that, Jason says, put me down for 2. I think he's talking about the lens pens.
The peeps, yeah.
The peeps. Yeah, they are so cool. Honestly, if we sold them at Henry's, we'd be sold out all the time. I don't even understand. I'd keep it in my pouch. Anytime I'd see somebody with glasses, I'd be like, and it would be clean and the world would be good.
Well, on the weekend, you took them out of your bag, and I think you cleaned one person's glasses, and then all of a sudden they disappeared, and they came around, and then I used them on my sunglasses, and then eventually you got them back after making like the giant round through everyone with glasses.
I couldn't find them when I got home. I couldn't find them anywhere, and I was like, oh my God, somebody stole them. No, all my people are awesome and honest.
Yep.
Okay. Discussion. Let's get to this. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, and it's already about 10:30. So I'm exaggerating.
So we're on time.
Right on time. Okay, so this could be, like I'm saying, it could be a very long and horrifically confusing show. There's so much stuff that we can talk about when it comes to software. But then again, it could possibly be the best video on the differences in editing software out there. What do you think, guys? Think we can do it?
I think so.
Yeah. Keep my fingers crossed. So I'm hoping that on tonight's show, we're going to show the interface of each software. So one of us will have the interface open as a screen share. I'll lock on that. And then the rest of the group will give some little tips and give their experiences with each of those softwares. And whatever we are familiar with, we will chime in on and give you some insight as to the differences. I think a lot of the conversation will land on Blake's lap, because of the software. We don't want to focus primarily on Lightroom and Photoshop. It would be very easy to just sit here and do a whole show on Lightroom and Photoshop, but that's not what we're doing here. And if we talk too long about those two, then there won't be any time for the rest of it. So we're going to talk about the rest of it, which I think is very important. what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through and I'd like to just give a description of how we started off in photography and what softwares we graduated to first. Or gravitated, I should say, to first. Myself, when I started off in photography, it was when I started at Henry's. I was never in photography before. My editing consisted of Corel Draw, where I was doing flyers and advertisements for where I used to work at Nosh Audio, doing their print ads and stuff like that. So when it came time for me to get into photo editing, I started getting into Lightroom, because that's what everybody at work did. Oh, not Lightroom, sorry, Photoshop, because that's what everybody at work did. They're always talking about Photoshop, this and that. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll try it. And it was never easy to use. Like, it was very intuitive for me to use the Corel Draw software. It was just drag and drop, and it was very easy. I was really hoping for some editing software to continue on with that ease of use, and I never found it, even to this day. So once I started using Photoshop, I got fairly decent with it. Not great, but okay. And then I started using Lightroom because that's what everybody's using. Gabriel was, very strong with Lightroom, and Ross and all the guys that I hang out with, and Navi. It's all about Lightroom. So I started investing a lot of time in that, and I went to some seminars and did some training and private tutoring, and I went and learned a lot from Ross and the guys I work with. So Lightroom became my mainstay. That's pretty much where I live. But I've never been able to find my photos as easily as when I was editing in Photoshop, because I'd edit and I'd save each individual image with a name. With Lightroom, I edit all my photos and I export them as a number. And if my system isn't right, or if my hard drives fill up and I have to back up stuff, I get confused and I get lost and it's all missing. So I may not be the only person who's had this issue, or I may just be incredibly stupid. I don't know. But that's my experience. Phil, what's your experience?
Well, you kind of covered it a little bit earlier, but when I started shooting and started editing, I think the first thing I used to edit was like Google's Picasa at the time. And I went from Picasa to Nikon Capture. I think it was just Capture NX at the time. I'm not quite sure. I don't quite remember. But that came with one of my cameras, and so I started using that for a bit. And then from that, I moved over to shooting with Photoshop, I think CS3. And then I kind of stuck with Photoshop for a little bit. Eventually added in Lightroom, and then had a dual use between Lightroom and Photoshop, depending on what it was I was shooting. And now I've settled pretty much with mostly Lightroom, a little bit of Photoshop. But I know there's a ton of stuff out there, and there's a ton of free stuff out there. However, that's just kind of my experience. Sits with those two, the ones I'm the most comfortable with. Oddly enough, back when Henry's ran software courses on a more regular basis, and I was supposed to teach the Photoshop Elements version, I picked up a copy of Photoshop Elements to get used to, and I found it kind of confusing and kind of backwards compared to the actual Creative Suite, because with the Photoshop CS5 or whatever I wanted to do was there and ready to go. Whereas on the Elements side, I found it was buried and less intuitive.
I think if you start in Elements, it's one thing, but if you've already been used to the harder one, you're looking for the... You can't see the forest for the trees, so to speak.
Exactly. But yeah, mainly it's a Lightroom most of the time, Photoshop to finish pictures, like the eagle picture I posted yesterday. I started that in Lightroom, got all my cropping, everything done how I wanted, bumped it over to Photoshop just to do the finishing, 10%, bring it to that level I wanted. And then after I did that, I realized I wanted to make adjustments and gave up. For the most part, start to finish.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Awesome. Thank you very much. Michael, how long have you been shooting? How long have you been shooting and editing and doing all this?
I've been shooting 5-6 years. I'd say 6 now. And that's if we count starting my high school classes. I started actually taking pictures and paying attention to photography when I was taking my first photography class in grade 11. So.
And what did you use to edit at the very beginning? Was it always the same stuff you use today?
Yeah, at the very beginning I was using Photoshop, and I had started learning Photoshop a little bit earlier in high school in my multimedia classes. I was in a dedicated program in Toronto called Cyber Arts, and it just put a toe in the water for every multimedia genre. And initially, I couldn't stand Photoshop. They tried teaching me Illustrator as well, which was even worse. I can understand the math, but it's just atrocious to work with that interface. And briefly looked at Lightroom and just put it back down again immediately. Started really paying more attention to Photoshop when I was in high school, doing a lot more extracurricular homework just for myself of figuring out what could be done. And between those classes, I took an internship, did my co-op classes with a photographer downtown Toronto. I stayed with Photoshop the whole way there. I couldn't touch Lightroom for the life of me. And luckily I didn't have to after that, because when I got to college, they wanted us to learn Photoshop, but they said, skip Lightroom altogether, we're teaching you Capture One. And once they showed me that, I was completely in love. It's, as far as user interfaces go and the tools and the strength of the algorithms, it's just a sexy program.
But I'm really looking forward to learning more about Capture One, because I know you and Blake both use it.
Yeah.
It was funny because I initially hated it for one reason. I was being really snobbish about this one feature that was lacking in Capture One Pro 7, which is what we were using when we started. And that was in Photoshop, I really like to do localized white balance adjustments. I like to do adjustment brushes in Adobe RAW, and you can do it in Lightroom, and change the white balance and adjust just minor white balance changes throughout the image. And of all the things for this to be missing, Capture One didn't have that. So in later versions of it, they did add that feature and a ton of other features on top of it that I couldn't even think to ask for. And now the color control in Capture One is probably the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's just so much control.
You're going to have to show us a little bit about that in a minute. But first, Blake, how about yourself? And what's the progression? Because I've known you for a while, and I've seen you try all kinds of different things. But where did it all start, and what's your process? What's your progression, I should say?
Oh, when I actually got into editing, I started out with Lightroom, actually. I played around, I never really got proper courses ever on Photoshop. I did a lot of layout work before, so I was more like PageMaker and some of the older layout programs, but nothing really towards photography, like photo editing. So I jumped in with Lightroom, I went over to Nick to add on to that, and then on one, and then I knew that Photoshop had that steep learning curve, and I was kind of putting it off just because I'm like, these things can get me to a certain point. I will learn that as I need to. I hit a point, I was like, okay, it's time to learn it, and I just dove straight in. As I was learning, I found out about Capture One along the way. That just blew Lightroom out of the water when it came to the editing quality. But it took me forever to try and get the grasp of that goddamn interface. And Michael Velostrovich, who is a Toronto photographer who's out in LA for the last little while, he does a lot of high-end model photography, and it was his videos that got me to wrap my head around how Capture One works. And from there, I was just like, okay, I'm good. I'm start flying through it.
Cool.
And then Topaz has been the recent addition, which I have been loving some of their stuff as I've been going on. So it's just been like a natural progression, starting with getting the information down where everyone wanted to organize and edit. Lightroom was a good starting place, and I just kind of built up off of there, and my workflow has constantly evolved and changed. It hasn't stayed put.
And it's interesting because we were talking in the pre-chat also about how you've tried all these different things, but you see it as it's just another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
You're building a bigger toolbox.
Yeah. Well, I end up with a bigger toolbox, but I pick out the software depending on what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. So I was saying before during our pre-chat, it's like when it comes to noise reduction, I actually like Topaz's denoise better than Nick's define. It just, for me, it keeps better detail and does a better job of noise reduction.
Oh, you could usually tell that softness that you get from noise reduction. So this other one does a better job. I find it has more control, like fine-tune control, and it gives you a better, cleaner image at the end, like better detail and stuff. So I would use that one. But if I wanted a really quick vignette, or I wanted to do that
Analog kind of like that matte kind of feel. Analog effects from Nick, just so fast, so quick, just bam, bam. Okay, I'm done, and off I go. So it depends on what is I'm looking for, what I'm working with. I know which tool now is the best at that certain thing, and there's a lot of tools in there I just don't touch because they don't do what I needed.
Yeah. Well, cool. All right. Well, we're going to get into a bunch of these things, but first I want to quickly talk about the stuff that you don't need to spend a lot of money on, because we are all photographers. We see this as part of our business. It's something that we kind of require to further and to get better at what we do. So there's some software that we have to have. Like in my mind, in my world, I have to have Photoshop and Lightroom. But there's a lot of free stuff out there, and I've tutored people, and they say, I've used Picasa for years. I love Picasa. It's so much more straightforward. And then when it's time that they can't use Picasa anymore because Picasa is now fizzling away, then what do? They're so used to this interface that is very straightforward. And for those of you who don't know, Picasa is software that was around for a very long time, and it's free software, and it does a really decent job. But what happens is it'll copy all of your photos into a separate folder on your computer, so now you have doubles of everything. Very much like what iPhoto does in Mac computers.
Mm-hmm.
You end up going through storage space like crazy if you're using this as a high-volume photographer. If all you're doing is getting your family portraits, or not portraits, but family photos from vacations and hanging out with people and doing things like that, I can see a software like that copies things the way it does as being okay. But when you start shooting a lot, you guys got to admit this would start to become ridiculous. I mean, I have a hard enough time with Lightroom, which is non-destructive and doesn't double and double and double things, but still adds files. I have a hard enough time just keeping track of my stuff with that much volume. So, have you guys used Picasa? Have any of you used that?
Not in a long time. Back in 2008, 2009, I think I was playing around with it, and I really hadn't looked at it since.
Yeah, I just don't think it really satisfies the needs of a high-volume photographer. I don't want to say professional. I keep on saying high-volume because it just means you're taking a lot of pictures, and it goes. Mm-hmm. Anybody can do that.
I did find a good use for it. Picasa has they have a backup tool that ties into Picasa, which also ties into Google Photos, incidentally. So at one point I wanted to back up all my photos. I got this tool, I can't remember the name of it. It's like Google Picasa's Uploader or something like that. And I just pointed to the directory, include all my subdirectories, go. And it synced all my photos.
Okay, so this is the Google Photos Uploader you're talking about.
Picasa came first.
So Picasa had the same system.
Yeah, that's actually where the Google Photos one came from, was an offshoot of this one.
Because I remember you telling me about this. It took like a month for everything to upload for you.
Well, I did Google Drive. That one took like 3 months or something like that.
Geez.
But just the photos took took under a month. But that's the extent I used Picasa. It was just like, here, let me see. Cause I tried they had the face recognition back then. I never actually used it to edit photos, but I was like, organizing some things, and then I was like, hey, they have this uploader thing. And I remembered it just last year. And I was like, I'm going to back up things just as a precaution. And just after they gave the unlimited storage, I was just like, go. And everything went up. I was like, that's pretty cool.
So I actually did this, and you mentioned Google Photos. I did this with Google Photos. And this is another free software, which, in my view, is one of the coolest things ever in photography. Okay, so first of all, it is owned by Google, as Picasa was. So these are basically the Picasa interface is now merged with Google Photos. So the editing capabilities of Picasa are now buried into Google Photos, which is also free, as I've said. I literally have, I've mentioned it before, 15 to 17 terabytes of hard drives full of stuff. And I'm talking stuff since back to 2003 when I started doing whatever I started doing with camera stuff. Before I started at Henry's in 2006. So all of these drives with all these photos I synced, like Blake just suggested, to Google Photos. And that literally took a month for everything to upload. And if you don't have unlimited internet at home, then don't do this, because if you only are allowed to have a couple gigs of upload download, don't do it, because you would end up paying billions of dollars. It's not fun. So I ended up doing all this, and now I can literally go through. And to give an example, I was at work at Henry's, and I got a message from a student of a yoga instructor that I had shot in 2012. And I went to his yoga thing, and I was taking pictures, and I didn't even remember about these things. So she asked me, do you still have these photos? And I'm thinking, I know I do somewhere. They're buried in a hard drive somewhere. I just have no clue where these things are. So I pulled out my phone, I went into Google Photos, and I just typed in yoga. And there they are. It told me the date, it told me the month. I was able to go back and find the original RAW files that way through my hard drives. It made it much easier to locate things. So even if I'm not using it to edit, using it just to find my old photos became super awesome. So, have you used it for that at all? Have any of you guys used Google Photos for this?
Finding stuff, definitely.
Yeah, I love it. And not only that, I mean, Google Photos is going to take your pictures and do fun things with them, which I love.
Like making a GIF.
Yeah, like making them into little GIF files, or putting snow falling down if it sees snow, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Before we go too far, I totally forgot this part of the show. I just want to remind anybody, if you are watching and you have something to add to our conversation. If we talk about Picasa and you've got a story that you've used it for this and it's a real benefit for that, use the Q&A part of our Hangout and let us know what you're thinking, because that's really going to help us out with our show. If we don't know about something, we want to hear it from you guys as well. That's what a community show is all about. So to do that, it's using the Q&A app within the Hangout. If you hover your mouse over the window that you're watching right now, along the left side, this little window will kind of slide out. One of them says Q&A, hit that button, and then you can chat to us like Brandon did earlier in the show, and he asked the question, what's the best software to make composite of star trails? Now, it's going to sidetrack us a little bit, but I think it's time that we answer Brandon's question so he doesn't have to wait till the end of the show to hear it. Does anybody have experience blending, making composite pictures with star trails?
I can tell you I don't. However, I know that you've done a show on that before.
You have. You're right about that. I think Photoshop is the most common software to do blending, opening it in layers, but there's so many different ways to do it.
Yeah, there's one that's just called Star Trails. There's other ones that they basically are designed specifically for that. And that's one of the things I was talking about, is like when I want to find the best tool to do certain things, I look for something that's just designed specifically for it. Photoshop is great for being able to do infinite things, but it can take you infinite time to get those certain things done. Whereas, with Star Trails, yeah, Photoshop can do it. These other programs can do it faster, better. They can't do everything else Photoshop can do, but damn, they do this very, very well.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about the show that we did years ago. I believe it was a software called StarTrax. StarStax.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
StarStax. So that might be something to look into. I believe it's StarStax, and that might be something that you want to get in. Maybe just do a little research on, Brandon, and see if that helps you out at all. Okay, so let's just get back to our notes here. So Google Photos, yeah, seriously, love it. Anybody should try it. I don't see it as a replacement of any of the editing software we have amongst ourselves, but I see it as a really great option for having cross-platform availability of all your photos. Like anything. I could be at work and I can find any photo I've ever taken right on my phone, which is awesome. It's not stored on my phone. It doesn't take up space. I can access it through a web browser, and it makes it more straightforward. And it's all from my photos that are right here on my hard drives. It doesn't make any changes to my original images. I can't save back to these hard drives from that, but at least I can access and see some cool stuff. Who used GIMP? Blake used GIMP.
Yep.
Okay, so GIMP, G-I-M-P. Whenever I hear the word GIMP, I think of that Tarantino movie, Pulp Fiction.
Pulp
Yes.
Fiction.
That's the first thing I think. Black mask, the GIMP hanging there. Anyway, don't give people visuals there.
GIMP is an open source solution that was developed on Linux for the Photoshop users who can use who were getting away from Windows. So it's free. They do have a Windows version.
Hang on a second. What did you just say?
For people, it's basically there for Windows users who wanted to get away from Windows.
Okay, so if I was a Windows user and I was
you wanted to get away from it, you didn't want to go Mac, you wanted to go something else, and you wanted, for example, people who are extremely nerdy and want to get into Linux, who want to do command line stuff back in the day, because Linux originally did not have much of their graphical interface was a little lacking back in the day, to say the least, but they wanted to be able to edit their photos still. GIMP was the option. It did layers, it did your adjustments, it did masks. It has fallen behind in the fact that it doesn't do anything similar to smart objects. Same thing with Corel stuff. They all stick with layers and adjustments and stuff like that, which work really well. However, they have limitations that, when compared to, again, smart objects have their limitations as well, but they offer massive benefit in many cases at the same time.
Smart objects is something I've never really gotten too heavy into, but I know the people that use them. I mean, they do great things.
Yeah, it's basically it can save you space because you're not duplicating your layers over, like your image over and over and over again as you're creating layers. You can because you can just make your one smart object. You can nest it within itself, and it just keeps the adding on the changes with one base file at the very bottom.
So then GIMP is adding file size to every layered image that you make.
If you go into Photoshop and you duplicate a layer, your file size jumps. Same thing with GIMP. With using smart objects, you can actually get away from doing that because you can take a smart object and create what they call a nested smart object, and then you add more filters and make more adjustments, nest it again. So I'll have like this one main file, and then I have all these transformations and nested objects on wrapped around it, and I go through. I'm like, wow, that's a big file, but if I did that the traditional way, it'd be 3 times the size.
Okay, so there's a huge benefit for sure.
So, but GIMP in itself is actually they keep adding all the others, like all the traditional things. They added some stuff that Adobe tends to not listen all the time to what people ask for or people say. We've all gone through stories where we complain about something and nothing ever changes. The GIMP community, because it's open source, it changes very rapidly, and they take that into consideration. The one thing is, it's open source, and sometimes people can make mistakes and things can get screwed up, and they'll fix it really quickly. But you realize, I just lost a day of work. So there is some interesting bits that you can play around with, but GIMP is very powerful for a free software that it's kind of like it does 85 to 90% of what Photoshop does.
So it's totally cross-platform. It does Windows, it does OS X, it does all that. Yep. It's free. You can change your source code, so you can get in there and actually change the actual script of the program.
If you're a programmer. Do not do this otherwise.
No, yeah, I don't want to get into that. And it works with third-party plugins.
Yep. It's the same way that you can with Capture One, with On One, and stuff like that. You can add in an application link where it's like, I want to take this image, open it up in this program, do it for me, and it will work.
So for the most part, it sounds like a solid option as a free edit software.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely for free. It's a steal. It's cool. Amazing for the price that you're paying, to say the least.
All right. Well, thank you, Blake, for that. Who put in here about Darktable?
That would be me as well.
Okay, I've never even heard of Darktable before.
Darktable kind of falls along the same lines as GIMP. It's open source for the Linux crowd, and they wanted a Lightroom variation, and that is pretty much what Darktable does. It does everything that Lightroom does, aside from the publishing again. But like all the editing, the cataloging, the organizing your photos, the keywording, and all that type of stuff. Darktable does the same type of stuff, and they refine it a lot more because they are delving into it. Like the guys who do the programming on open source stuff, they dive into it all the time. They don't have to wait for a certain time of year to release an update. They are constantly evolving these platforms. That's the nice thing about GIMP and Darktable, is that they're always evolving. You don't have to wait around for, Photoshop's announcing something big at Photoshop World. No, 3 weeks ago they've already released it, and you're able to test it.
Okay, so again, that would be more something for people who are into software and into trying all kinds of different things, and
Yep.
always want to be on the edge of what's coming in.
Yeah.
Cool. Now you have Inkscape here, and I put in Pixlr. Inkscape is something I've not heard of, but Pixlr, Pixlr, they both sound like something similar. They both are very Instagram-y kind of. I may be wrong about you. You called Inkscape artsy fartsy, so I'm just gonna assume that is. Who put that in there? You put that,
I
Phil?
did, yeah.
Okay, Phil. Good. So what's that about, Inkscape?
Well, I was just thinking, we're doing a lot of editing stuff for making, photos and editing photos. If you ever want to take a picture and make it more of a painting, or take your photo and then make that into, art, if we get into that whole thing, it's a good option for anyone looking at taking what little kind of creative painting and artsy styles that Photoshop would let you do and taking it in a different direction. It's something that is very useful if you want to use your photos as a basis for painting or a basis for drawing off of, because it will allow you to do a lot more manipulation in that respect. And I know a lot of people end up taking pictures and they use their pictures as references for other things they're doing, other projects. It is a fantastic option for that, and it's free. And you've got me thinking on the open source side of things, and it's a fully open source piece of software, and it works pretty well.
Nice, nice. Okay, so there's quite a few choices there. We've talked about Google Photos, which is free, and you can load all your photos to it and do some quick edits and cropping and enhancements and Instagram effect filters and even get a little bit more into it, but nothing with. However, it does keep history, which I really like when you do your edits, and you can go back and change by history, which is nice. So Google Photos is an option. Picasa is kind of fizzling away. GIMP sounds like a really cool choice. Pixlr and Inkscape are both going to give you a lot of tools that sound similar to me to what you get from what's the name of that? You talked about Topaz.
Topaz Impressions.
Yes. Yeah. With all the different visuals and painting and art modes and so on. So there's some cool things, and they're all free, right? So if anybody's interested in getting software, the whole show here isn't about buying expensive stuff. But
if you did want to buy expensive stuff,
nice segue. I like what you
or find it on the internet,
or
which you should never do. That is bad.
Yes, I know nothing about what you were talking about. Wink, wink. I saw that. If you want to get into this stuff, then there are a lot of other softwares to talk about. Now, we mentioned Corel earlier, and it's funny because in preparation for the show, I searched simply best photo editing software. And the first thing that came up is the top10reviews.com 10 best photo editing software reviews, and Gold Award went to Corel Paint Shop Pro. Now, I've never used it. I loved Corel back when I was doing my desktop publishing, I guess you could say, but I've never used it for photo editing. Have any of you guys got experience using Corel Paint Shop Pro?
No.
Which one did I do? I did one of them.
I use Corel Painter.
Okay, so what do you use that
I don't know
for?
what's Paint Shop. I didn't really use it for much per se. They had it at the school when I was at Humber. My old girlfriend was in one of the visual and digital art programs that she had to use it, and I believed did some photo editing with it as well, and they used that to stylize the photo to make it look more like a painting. But
Right.
one of the things that was really interesting that they did with it that I remember her working on was you were able to sort of lay the original photograph down as a background sort of palette to work with and individually blend sections of it and sort of, rather than doing an automatic rendering into a stylized painting, you could manipulate it with a paintbrush rather than manipulate it with Photoshop tools.
Interesting.
So you could manually stylize it, and that's about as much detail as I could remember giving. It was really cool to watch, but I don't know much about how that works.
I've heard that the interface is really nice in Corel software. I would like to actually experience it myself. I'm not prepared to go and spend a lot of money on something that I just want to try.
Yeah.
And I know you can download previews and so on, but I'm not a big fan of doing those either. So what I do like very much about Corel, and it's a huge incentive for me to actually spend the money for the software. And our other viewer, Dennis, was a huge fan of Corel. He talked about it on several of our shows in the past. What I love about it is Corel Corporation is actually a Canadian software company. It's headquartered in Ottawa. And it's really, Corel is really a company that specializes in graphics processing. So their skill is excellent. And I really would like to try it out. So this is me shaking my head to Blake. And so, okay, so Corel has been known for producing software titles like Corel Draw, acquired PaintShop Pro, Video Studio, and WordPerfect. So they pretty much have the whole gamut covered, from word editing to video editing to photo editing to the PaintShop look. So if you're looking for some good software and you wanted to support a Canadian company, which I absolutely am in favor of, then that is something that I would highly at least look into it. So Corel Draw is not the software you want to get into because that's more for desktop publishing, but PaintShop Pro is apparently quite good. And interestingly enough, the number 2 choice in that, the best photo editing software, was Photoshop Elements.
Ooh.
Which is weird because Creative Suite and Lightroom, and none of those are even in the list. So I don't really know what's going on there.
There might be a price cap on some of that.
It could be.
Background on stuff, usability, access. Because I know, I think most of the Corel stuff's under $150.
No.
Some more expensive stuff.
Yeah. Give me a second. I know with they do have specials and stuff like that, but if you went, for example, let me just see. Corel Painter is $500.
Okay, never mind that.
Yeah, it can get up there.
Yeah.
But it's good stuff. And
Yes.
if it's as good as it was when I was using it back in the day, it was just super easy to use, makes sense, and I definitely consider it again. But something that you guys do have experience with is Capture One.
Yeah.
And I don't think I even had it in the... Oh, wait, there it is. It's down a little bit lower. Why don't we talk about Capture One a little bit, because this is something that we can do a screen share of and really get into some really cool benefits. And you guys have both talked about Capture One. So, Michael, do you have it open by any chance?
I do. I could show you mine.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let me just take a quick look at the notes here. Yeah. So I'm going to do my screen share now.
As you get that pulled up, I will say the one nice thing about Capture One, even though it's been probably a good 4 or 5 years since I used it, I keep getting emails from them with different ideas and different tips and different techniques. Sure, it's all associated to Capture One, but I still get it, and there's a weird man in a lab coat in some of them. But
that always makes you happy, right?
It's science. But a lot of the things they're showing seem really interesting. I've just never wanted to download it and try it again, but now I'm getting convinced I should.
I am starting to as well. So, Michael, why don't you preach to the choir, my friend?
All right, Capture One has to be the sports car of all editing softwares, because the interface is really nice, and one of the things I noticed Blake added in the notes, it's customizable. All of these tool tabs you'll see on the side here have, like, they've got their default tool tabs with what's included, but all of these tabs can move. You can bring in different floating tools and include them into any of your tabs. You can take them out and actually use it as a floating tool independent of anything else. And it's really just a smooth way to work. But the tools themselves are gorgeous. They've got a dedicated black and white section, just like in Lightroom has this, where you can adjust the luminosity of the colors. It also has a split tones section for when you're in black and white that you can do different color adjustments. But the really, really nice tools they added that Lightroom doesn't have, one example, I don't think Lightroom has this, is the loop tool, and I use this all the time. You can change the magnification range of it, you can change the size of the loop, and this is really just If you don't want to go to the trouble of zooming in and losing half the frame, just click and you've got a magnifying glass on your screen that shows you everything fully rendered, nice sharp detail. And it's fantastic for checking sharpness. Another nice feature of Capture One that is similar to Lightroom, but I would say so much nicer, is tethered capture. So you can actually plug in your camera to the computer and everything you shoot will go directly into your session for Capture One. And one of the nice things that they've added is actually a program called Capture Pilot for the Apple's smart devices. You can also do it for web, but really nice, really friendly for Apple products. I've got it on my iPad that you can wirelessly connect your iPad to the computer, and every photo you take is going to display in the iPad session that's set up here that you can start a Capture Pilot server. It's one of the tools here. And what's really nice is if you're working with a group, if you have more than one person on hand in the studio, or if you're doing a bigger job and you have an art director, is really common to do this, hand your iPad over to someone else, and as you're shooting, they can go through and view, check focus, they can rate the images. And another feature on top of that is Capture Pilot is initially free, but you can buy the added features that actually turns it into remote. So you can change your camera settings from your phone or your tablet. You can activate the shutter from your tablet, and it's really, really handy to do remote work with it. But it's absolutely great for being able to quickly view the images, quickly rate the images, and have someone else on the team that's checking for you so that you're not chimping your camera. Another really, really nice thing, like I was talking about, how they've added color features to it that were so much better than anything I've used in Photoshop or Lightroom. Two things right off the bat is their color editor, which they have basic, advanced, and skin tone editing. I don't know how well you guys can see this on my screen.
It's pretty small, but I see where you're at.
Yeah. They also have the color balance wheels, and this is such a gorgeous thing that they've added recently to the program. So this is an already slightly retouched version of this photo. I'll go back to the default here and show you.
As you're doing that, Michael, sorry to butt in here, but Blake is showing some stuff around. What are you doing there, Blake?
He mentioned the tethering, so I'm actually just tethered through Capture One using the live view that's built into their program, so you can actually see it's giving my screen's actually showing the live view of my camera on, like, right in the screen. So I'm just pointing at my own thing, but I can, like, just go around and focus on whatever I want. And this is all within Capture One live view, just like on the back of your camera, going straight to your computer, so you can see it nice and big. And you have all your adjustments and stuff like that that give you an idea of the tethering capabilities.
And
so
that's your D800 you have?
Yeah, this is my D800 tethered to my computer. And here's all the settings I can change. So I'm in my manual shooting mode. I can change my shutter speed, my aperture, ISO sensitivity, white balance. You know, I'm shooting raw. There's my image size. I can change all these things if I wanted to.
That's really cool.
All from my program and stuff like that. And yeah, it's complete live view, zipping around on my screen and stuff like that.
Neat.
So,
all right, cool.
Are you using your D800 as your webcam?
I actually found a program to do that. I have not yet.
Neat.
So,
okay, cool. Thanks, Blake.
I'm being silly.
All right, Michael, go right ahead. Continue on.
Okay, so let me start from scratch here after, so you can see there's very subtle differences that you can do with this, but just how powerful they are I'll show you in a moment here. One quick thing I'll show you with the color wheel is it's similar to working with curves, that you've got isolated shadow, midtone, and highlight, and you can adjust the color. And I'll go really extreme here to show you the color of the shadows, the color of the midtones, as just going completely wonky, and the color of the highlights can be changed independently of each other. I can reset this here and show you that they've also got luminance adjustments of each spot, so I can strengthen the blacks or fade them, I can adjust the mid-tone brightness, and I can adjust the highlight brightness. Oh,
That's
there.
a big adjustment.
So I can do this
They look
as
the
well.
same.
So there's lots of play that you can have here, but it's really nice for doing subtle adjustments and just adding that little bit of tint in different directions and really playing with the color. And again, I keep hitting that button. So that's a really cool feature, but another nice thing to do with it, and you can just see, I don't know how well you can see, but really, really nice smoothing out the tones there when you add that color. But another nice thing to do, one thing I have to point out is the skin tone editor for the color editing here. I can just sample any section of skin, and I can turn on view selected color range, and what I've selected here is going to show me everything else goes black and white, and whatever matches into this area of color that I've selected, it's going to show me. And often I get this little pizza slice on the wheel here, and a little bit of feathering outside of that, and that's the smoothness slider, is going to put a little bit of edge to my selection just so it bleeds into the other tones nearby and I don't get a hard edge of whatever I'm working with. But I can actually drag the edges of this and pull it in, and that's going to take off some of the red of that selection and focus more on the yellows. And you can see now the hair having a lot more yellow pigment is more highlighted. There's small aspects of the face that are being picked up here. But I could go the opposite direction, pick up more of the red, and take out the yellow. And it's going to isolate as much as possible on just the pink pigments in the face. And I could turn off the view selected color range again, and now I've got just this area I can adjust. And I can push the hue of it, and it's very minor adjustments for really finite details, but I can push the hue a little bit more magenta, a little bit more yellow. And another thing is the uniformity. So I can try to push for example, I'll push the amount of hue towards the magenta, and then the uniformity I'll bring up. And that's going to bring all of those tones, any mixtures of yellow and magenta tones in this are going to blend together. And I can come back up into the amount and push that and find somewhere comfortable with it. Now, it's going to be hard to notice on your screens probably because it's such minor adjustments to the color. But for a quick example, I can undo this quickly. Yeah, you're really not seeing much of a change here.
Yeah, it's pretty subtle.
So I'll make it a little bit more extreme. What I can do is, as well with the uniformity and amount, I can adjust the saturation of color. Let's just bring the color right out with that so you can see that happening there. And now pushing the hue back and forth, you see much more magenta, much more yellow happening here. And the uniformity really brings things together.
So how does this work with file management, though? I mean, the edit ability is awesome, and you've got all your subtle changes that you can make and your major changes, and it's customizable. But as far as what do you do with your photo when you're done? Because in Lightroom, we're trained that you're exporting and you're not just saving a picture, but in Photoshop, I was just saving the picture. Like, how does that work with Capture One?
Now, Capture One is really, really nice for file management because it's got its dedicated library folder over here, and what I can do is you have the option of creating a catalog or a session every time you work in Capture One. A session is just going to be all of your files if you want to do a tethered session, or if you're doing a shoot and you're just pulling all the files off your card, then you can have a session on your computer and bring everything directly into that. It's just a very singular aspect. It creates a folder where everything is isolated with what you would normally have, and it's not showing here. You would have a capture folder where all of your imported photos would go. You could have your select folder where you can isolate certain files that you want to keep separate. Your output folder is going to have any of your outputted files, and you even have a trash folder that you can work with. So even just anything that you want to do for organizing your files is still going to stay dedicated in these folders for your session and easy to find in your file explorer on your computer. The other option is using a catalog, which, unlike a session, you can collect files from multiple folders, multiple sessions, and it's similar to what you were talking about with Google Photos, that you could put keywords on something and make it easier to search. Like currently, I haven't explored much with catalogs, but I'm working on a painting series right now, and I've got several sessions over time with that, but I've got one singular catalog that has all of those photos together, which makes it really easy to navigate. As far as file management on the exporting side goes, there's a process toolbar in Capture One that you can have process recipes, and you can have as many recipes as you want, and you can enable as many of them as you want, which is really, really nice, because you can have a lot of features included, like setting up a PSD export. You can decide the size of it, the bit depth, if you want to include metadata, any file adjustments, a watermark adjustment even.
So you can add your watermarks all through there?
Yep. I haven't explored much with that, but it does have a watermark feature here.
Cool.
You can decide the scale of it, the resolution, all in this. You can even set it to open in another program when you're done processing.
Was that what you were working on there, Phil? Or sorry, Blake?
Sorry, I was just going through to pull up the whole catalog end of things as he's talking about it. I'm just trying to remember where I put my catalog. So I just moved a whole bunch of stuff around recently. I'm like, oh yeah, I moved stuff.
Now, when you move stuff in Capture One, is it like Lightroom where you're moving the file within your computer when you move it in Lightroom, or does Capture One you move all your stuff still separately in different programs or different stuff?
Well, as I just did here with the catalog, I had moved my files actually around because I'm working with backing them up on Google Drive because I was hoping to redo one of my other computers, and I want to make sure all my stuff's backed up beforehand. So I moved photos, and Capture One went, hey, these are all offline. Where is everything? So I just told it to, hey, here's the folder, and it's refinding everything right now. So that's kind of putting everything back in place. So it's the same. The catalog is very much the same as what Lightroom does.
Okay.
Session, you can browse your entire hard drive, find photos everywhere. It's more. It has cataloging capabilities with keywords and all that stuff, but it browses things like Adobe Bridge.
Okay. Now, Michael, you said before about keywording that you can do all the keywording and stuff in there. Now, my question though is, and you compared it to Google Photos. Google Photos, you don't have to keyword. It just senses the stuff and makes changes. And not makes changes. It senses faces. No, I was just curious if this software that Capture One has will auto sense cats, and you search cats, and all your cats show up.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with Google Photos. But
okay, fair enough.
So I missed that point a bit. As far as I know, that doesn't do that. I haven't even really played around with naming anything or tagging anything. They've been very adamant about advertising that you can have that feature now, but it's not really one that I've needed to explore with. Luckily, granted, I haven't had anyone coming at me 10 years later asking for photos that I can't find.
That's a good thing.
Here's one of the things that they just did bring out regarding the cataloging features. So Lightroom, you have to say, I want this keyword, this keyword, this keyword, and everything else put on there. They have put in basically a spot where you can go in and drop in tokens. So you can say, in this token, I want the session name put in here. I want, this counter number. I want, so it'll build your structure on your computer based off of what these tokens are, or it'll take the information from your structure and that will feed into your tokens to create your keywords and to make it easier to find your photos and stuff. So they've built in this entire wildcard token concept for your keywording and for your library management to facilitate things that, Lightroom is very much, you put in your keyword, your photo is going to reside here. It's like, well, if I want a smart collection, I want to find a smart collection which includes this token involved in it. This token's tied to a folder location. It finds it for me. And I want this other token to be, a changing of the date or whatever. So all of a sudden, it's pulling all these things together and making it very complex searches and, making things a lot more powerful than just your typical, oh, the file is here and my keywords are here. So it offers like a whole new level on top of what Lightroom is typically known for. But I will say, when this thing comes to a full catalog, when you have thousands and thousands of photos on it, it's a dog. It's slow when you have that many photos in a catalog. I'm still searching through trying to get mine all back up and running right now.
Yeah, I can see that.
But Lightroom would have been done by now, so I give them, they're better with working with larger catalogs, but I usually, for me, I don't use this catalog too often. I'm shooting in sessions for the most part, and then when I get to Lightroom down the road, I worry about my big catalog at the end.
Got it. Well, okay, so Michael, Capture One and Photoshop, that's your baby, right?
Yep.
So we're not going to get too into Photoshop, but what do you go to Photoshop for that Capture One won't do?
Retouching. I do pretty much everything in Capture One as much as possible. The only time that I'm ever going to come to Photoshop is if I want to do more advanced retouching to an image. There is some degree of spot removal that you can use in Capture One for retouching, but if you really want to go the extra mile with it, Capture One does not have the advanced editing methods.
Okay.
The other thing is compositing. And I mean, the guys that make Capture One very deliberately claim that they are not intending to replace Photoshop. This is just the first step before Photoshop. It does a great job of replacing Lightroom, but the actual photo manipulation, the retouching aspect of editing a photo is still strictly Photoshop for me.
Okay.
But when it comes to just processing, I like to stay in that. There was one thing that was really nice with Capture One that I can probably show a little bit better here if you want to see this. As far as color editing goes.
If you can do it quickly, the only reason is it's already 10:35, so technically we should be off the air.
I'll be quick with this. The advanced editing feature, one thing is gorgeous about this is editing colors, like I was talking about, doing that isolated selection. I've got this peach here. I'll select just the yellows in this peach, and I can push that hue towards the green or towards the red, and I can bring it right into the reds, and it looks natural. Looks like it was never yellow in the first place. So where I was talking about taking different hues, when you get skin tones, there's always going to be a little bit of color variation in the skin. This tool is really, really nice for bringing those colors together and having less variation. It's much more noticeable in an image like this, where you can bring that color in. Another option is when you get reflections, like in this green apple over here, you've got the reflection of the peach in it. And what you can do instead of pushing yellow into the peach, or you can do this separately, normally the photo has that little bit of red reflection in the bottom of the apple. I can push it towards the green, and now I've got that vibrant green in the apple where I'm just taking all of the yellows in the image, I'm pushing it back into the green, and that gives that really nice vibrance to the apple here. And another feature that I won't get into showing is you can actually take these selections that you're looking at with the color and turn them into masks to use with the adjustment layers and do a whole range of extra adjustments with it while it's already isolated just those colors in the image.
Jeez.
So
that is pretty awesome.
For what it does, it's exceptionally powerful.
No, it definitely looks it. That's very cool. Thank you for sharing all that. That's really great. Okay, so we've talked about Capture One. Very cool. Something that confuses me though is like, what's the difference between on one and capture one? Why are they both one? Yeah. Blake, go for it.
Okay, so I'll jump into on one here. Just give me a second. So I'll see some break. Okay, so on one is I look at it as kind of like a halfway point between Lightroom and Photoshop. It has library management. You can do your keywording. You can find your photos. You can go through everything. You can star and rate your photos, and it's actually pulling in all my
Time out.
Sorry.
What's up with your audio?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got scratchy again.
Did it go funky again?
Yeah, man. You're getting all max headroom on us. I'm aging myself. I'm totally aging myself with max headroom. I know. Phil's killing himself.
Okay. CPU usage just spiked to 100%. That would be why.
So you have on one and capture one and the hangout and probably a dozen other things open.
I closed capture one.
Okay.
It's coming back down now. Do I sound better?
A little bit. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is more along the lines of a halfway point between Lightroom and Photoshop. Capture or on one I went to because they had this thing called a smart brush, or what they call a perfect brush. It was really good for if you wanted to mask in like a new sky or do some composite work that was very easy to see the details between. You could play around with the radius and how sensitive the brush was for masking and stuff like that, where you didn't have to do all the hand-drawn stuff for your mask to composite two images together. It's just like, hey, I brush over and the other image just shows up, and then you just do some minor tweaking afterwards. Made things a lot faster.
Okay.
But it's coming this year. It's going to be a full raw editing into editing suite. Currently, it's not designed to do raw photos.
Okay, so this is if you're a JPEG editor, a JPEG shooter, I say,
Or
only,
TIFF.
at least for now.
Yeah, it's getting raw editing. The idea would be that you do your basic raw adjustments in Lightroom or something like that, and then you can you export a TIFF file or whatever, and you can work on them in here, which is what I have in front of me. Now, if you look off to the side, it's very much like Bridge, where you can just browse through things, and here's my entire hard drive, and I can browse and find whatever I wanted. If I wanted to edit something, I have no idea what I'm going to edit in this group. Well, let's take this one here. I can say I want to open it in. Send to Photoshop, send to Lightroom, send to Analog Effects, send to Color Effects, send to Define, HDR, Sharpener Pro. It's already picked up the Nik stuff, it's picked up the Photoshop stuff, plus its own effects, enhance, layers, portrait, and resize.
So that looks very much like what you would have with the Lightroom and plugins.
Exactly.
Very cool.
It's picked it up automatically. I am going to. I'll jump. So effects is kind of like your basic editing within Lightroom. You got your exposure adjustment, your brightness, your saturation, your clarity, curves, stuff like that. Enhance is where you get into the creative stuff, where you can start throwing in multiple. What am I thinking? Well, different effects, like you get from color. Like if you want to do a split tone really quickly, or if you want to make it like an old-fashioned photo, or Hollywood style and things like that. They have them all named off. Layers allows you to do composite work really quickly. Portrait is skin tones. Gives you spots where you can actually put on. Let me see if I can just grab a quick photo here. Sure, that one.
So you choose your image in the equivalent to Bridge. You open that then in whichever separate plugin type module, I guess you could say, that ON1 offers.
Yep.
Okay, and so it's full of different modules.
Yeah. The one thing I was going to just mention with this, if I was going to jump in with the portrait one, you can do skin smoothing, but the one kind of interesting one was, oh, they changed it. Oh, my eyes in. Where's my eyes in both? Show me my eyes. They usually have a controller for the eyes and such, where it actually goes over, shows like a highlight over the eyes and over the mouth, and you can reshape it to make sure it fits what you're looking at. And
But reshape the entire eye?
no, like a selection area. So you can say brighten the eye.
Okay.
Yeah, brighten the eye, add more color to the lips, or darken them and stuff like that. Anyway, they just don't have it on by default right now for some reason. That's what happens when you're rushing through things. You forget. But whoops. Anyways, oh, that's why.
See, all of these things,
and this is tutorial.
This is why it gets confusing when we start talking about all these different softwares, because each one has similar features but in a different layout, and then they call their features different things, and then you have to go through different training to learn all the different features. I mean, it's not easy, and again, the whole point of the show today is just to say that there's a lot of different options, and there's a lot of fun, different subtle nuances that each software has. So I think that's really great that we're able to get into all these things.
Yeah.
However,
I just found the thing where you can go over and you shape in the shape. You make these in the shape of the eyes, and you can adjust the eyes and stuff like that. And you can do color correction, skin retouching, and stuff like that. But
can you do like teeth whitening and all that way too?
Yeah, you can actually do selection over the teeth and stuff like that. It's very much like Photoshop Elements meets Lightroom kind of feel to it. It just does a lot of the other heavy lifting, like you want to do the big edits where you're like, hey, I want this to look like an old school photo, or I want this to look like I think they have one plugin that mentions End of the Dragon, Bruce Lee. It's like that style of
cool.
look. So you can just go, yeah, here's the filter that makes it look kind of like that film. So they have some very interesting ways. It's one of the only ones I know that's a cohesive unit compared to the other plugins, where you have file management, you have the browser, you have your plugins and everything else. It can live without Photoshop on its own.
Got it.
And it's
very cool.
Beginning to end, whereas Nick and Topaz, the others, they require the Photoshop connection there to tie them together.
Okay. Speaking of that, we were going to get into some plugins, but we've done a whole show on plugins in the past. So I do recommend that people check out the plugins show. However, just to touch on it quickly, what a plugin is a separate specialty kind of software that you can access through other softwares. So, like I was mentioning, I use Lightroom and Photoshop, and within each of those, just like Blake just showed here, I can take that photo that I've worked on, say a wrestling headshot, and then I can do what I need to in Photoshop, export that to a plugin to give it a look or to give it a feel or to add a mood to it. And then when I'm done in that plugin, it saves directly back into the original software again, which you can either do more tweaks to or whatever. So plugins are a lot of fun. They're great little tools that you can have. A lot of them, like the Nick software, is completely free, which is very odd. So you can pay for Lightroom, $10 a month for Lightroom and Photoshop, but then you have this free plugin. And Blake, you mentioned before analog effects. Yeah. I love analog effects. You can do zoom blur, you can do double exposures, you can do all kinds of color corrections and film tones and specks and spots, and it's a really great plugin for on its own, like for Lightroom or whatever. You can do so much with it, but then you also get color effects, and you get define, and you get silver effects, and Viveza, and am I missing anything? Photo sharpener, raw retoucher, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the pro sharpener and stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of plugins you can get, and that's all free that you can plug into Lightroom and Photoshop. So I do recommend that people check all those out, but for now, I think we've covered a lot of stuff. What do you guys think? A lot of stuff.
I think so.
Is there anything that each of you would like to add now that we're toward the end of the conversation before we say our final what's and what's? Phil?
I'd say we looked at a lot of software. At the end of the day, it really comes down to how well you know your software. You can have 3 different softwares and not know how to use any of them and not get what you're looking for, or you can have one software, whether it be a free one or what you paid for, but as long as you know the ins and outs of it, you're comfortable using it, you're going to get the results you're at least looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So master one software and then maybe start looking at some other ones. Unless you're trying to master Google's Picasa and they're making it go away, then maybe look at a different one.
You know, that's a good point you just made about Google Software, the Picasa that's might be going away. My note would be stick to something that you know will last, because I don't know about you guys, but when I learn something, I want to just stick to it and get the most out of it. I don't want to have to relearn and relearn and relearn all the time, or else I'm spending more time learning and less time actually getting my results and my edits. So I say stick to something that you know will last. Michael, what do you think? What are your final thoughts?
I don't even know what to say for final thoughts. Pretty much covered everything.
We did cover a lot, and it can be overwhelming, eh? So, and I appreciate you getting into the Capture One stuff, because that looks really cool. $300 though. It's American. It's not
or $10 a month.
Or $10 a month. Okay.
Or $10 a month. Well, it's I think for the first year it's $10. It's up to 15 now for me. So.
I hate monthly payments.
Yeah.
All right, well, Blake, final thoughts?
A lot of these can give you a lot of freedom and stuff, but if you pick one software to be your, that you know you're going to be going to all the time, like Phil was saying, master it, get used to it, build off of it. I constantly change my workflow. I'm always looking for the new things that are coming out, but I know when it comes to certain things, I'm going back to Photoshop. I am learning to work on my selections for composites. I'm working on my skin retouching, all in Photoshop, and then I use these other ones for quick finishes. They're not where I'm going to spend my 3 hours of editing on trying to make a perfect photo. I'm going to, that's all in Photoshop. That's where I put my time in. But yeah, don't be afraid. Also, don't be afraid to try some of these things, because some of them, if you're not going into like high-end retouching, you don't need Capture One, you don't need Photoshop. It's like, hey, I just want to post photos to Instagram. On One does a great job, and they have training and they have videos, and they give you free plugin templates, like they have free additional plugins and not plugins, but templates for their plugins, so you get different looks and stuff every single month. It's a free thing that they offer every month. It's like, that's a great bonus. Nick is free. They haven't updated in a long time, but it's free.
And you know what? It did what it did well, so it doesn't need updating per se. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. And thank you again, Blake, for being here and for giving us your knowledge. You know a lot about these things that we would never know, so I really appreciate your input tonight. It's great.
My pleasure. And we didn't get back to the publishing stuff, but if you guys do a Lightroom library management thing, let me know. I'd be happy to show you my insane workflow.
I think we're going to have to do that. We'll have to break that up, because we can't be on here all night long. Yeah. Shelly got home, and I have barely even said hello to her. You know how it is. So,
hi, Shelly.
I'll make sure you say hi. She says she sees this. Okay, so we have our current photo challenge still ongoing. The current photo challenge is pet personalities. Have you guys seen any shots posted for that yet? I don't think so. It's still the first week, so.
Hopefully we'll see some stuff soon.
Hopefully they'll start trickling. Yeah, I know you don't have any pets.
Well, it can be like a personality that you just keep tucked away somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes. That matches somebody else's pet.
Could be.
You never know. Think outside the box, people.
Yep.
Okay, so still submit your photos for the pet personalities. And the quote of the day, we're going to send this over to Michael here to give us our quote of the day, because I think this is a Michael Lane quote.
Oh, I can't take too much credit for it, but I love how well it ties in with Philip and Blake's final statements, because upon looking at all these different editing softwares, it just felt too appropriate to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the size of the sword that counts, it's how you use it.
Aha! That could apply to so many things, but since this is a PG show, we will leave it at that. Very cool. Thanks, Michael. All right, so that's it for us for tonight, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. And we didn't have too much contributing through the Q&A, but I think that's because it's a confusing topic, maybe. So, but yeah, maybe next time.
Okay. And say if people come up with questions, as always, they can always post it in the community, which is apparently existing over here in the room.
I see it. It's over there.
If people have questions, they can always post in the community, and I'm sure one of us or someone else in the community, as always, will come up with an answer. Whether it's the right one, we'll find out later.
Good point. All right, well, that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next week. Next week's show, by the way, is going to be our banter show, and it's going to be fun, because it always is. But coming up soon, our next Tips and Techniques show is actually going to be on food photography. And guess who's going to be on as our special guest? Come on, guys, guess.
Navi.
Don.
Don? Somebody just wanted to take a shot. But yes, Navi Noom will be the guest on that show. And now, big news. We talked last week just for a minute about the upcoming 200th anniversary or 200th episode show, which is going to be on the 30th of November. I have confirmed one of the special things that will be going on for the 200th episode is almost all of the past Daytripper photo hosts will be on as guests.
That's awesome. And it's going to be, whether or not it's a banter show, it's going to be a banter show.
Yeah, we will banter on. It will be we'll force it to be a banter show, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So Gabra Bousquet is coming back, Navi Noob's coming back, and myself and Phil will all be on the show. And there weren't really any other hosts, so that's awesome, except for Darren Gahan, and unfortunately Darren won't be back on that for that one, but that's okay.
Busy man.
He's a busy guy, and I haven't asked him, so it should be a lot of fun. And we'll see you guys all shortly, and hopefully next week at least. Thank you all.
At least you're honest.
I am nothing but honest. Okay, I love Darren. He's a great guy, but you know, sometimes on the show it's a little different, little different. Let's just leave it at that. All right. On that note, hang on a second. Where's my foot?
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being on the show, and I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Sounds good.
See ya.
See ya.